Thank you for viewing this webinar. In this video, we'll review the December 2024 changes to Alberta's Occupational Health and Safety Code. Before we begin, please note the disclaimer and copyright notice on this page. We do our best to ensure that the information provided in this webinar is accurate and up to date. However, if there's any discrepancy between what is presented in this webinar and the OHS legislation, the legislation is considered correct. Please take a few moments to read the copyright notice. Also, please note it's the responsibility of worksite parties to comply with OHS legislation. This presentation is only a summary of the December 2024 changes to the OHS Code. Make sure to consult the OHS legislation or seek independent legal advice to ensure you're in compliance. The OHS Code is a regulation of Alberta's Occupational Health and Safety Act. It contains the detailed technical requirements for controlling health and safety hazards at workplaces. On December 4, 2024, the following areas of the OHS Code were updated: Part 27, Violence and Harassment; Part 33, Explosives; Part 37, Oil, Gas, and Geothermal Energy; and miscellaneous amendments across the OHS Code. The December 2024 changes to the OHS Code included new and revised definitions, updates to reflect best practices, standards, and equipment that industries were already using, replacing prescriptive requirements with requirements that focus on health and safety outcomes, aligning Alberta with other Canadian jurisdictions, and editorial changes to improve clarity and remove duplication. The updated OHS Code came into effect on December 4, 2024. During a transitional period between that date and March 30, 2025, worksite parties were allowed to comply with either the updated provisions or the prior provisions. However, starting March 31, 2025, worksite parties must comply with the updated provisions. We'll now go over highlights of the changes to the OHS Code, starting with the changes in Part 27. Part 27 outlines employer responsibilities to prevent workplace violence and harassment. Additional requirements for retail fueling outlets and convenience stores are also in this part. Two new definitions that are applicable to Part 27 were added to the OHS Code. Convenience store means convenience stores or other retail outlets that offer limited quantities of general goods for sale, such as food and household items, but does not include pharmacies, liquor stores, cannabis stores, or other retail outlets that focus on a narrow category of goods for sale. And retail fueling outlet means a retail outlet at which gasoline or other fuels are sold and pumped into the fuel tanks of motor vehicles. Let's now turn our attention to the changes and clarifications that were made in Part 27. Section 389, Hazard Assessment, was repealed because it was redundant with Part 2 of the OHS Code. To be clear, violence and harassment are hazards that must be addressed under Part 2 of the Code, along with all other worksite hazards. Previous requirements for separate violence and harassment prevention plan procedures are now consolidated in Section 390 of the OHS Code. Previous requirements for violence and harassment prevention policies are repealed, with any necessary policy elements moved into the Violence and Harassment Prevention Plan. Section 390.7 now includes requirements to review the Violence and Harassment Prevention Plan when there is an incident of violence or harassment that indicates a review is required, or a change to the work or worksite that could affect the potential for violence or harassment. Section 391, Training of Workers, includes an updated requirement to train workers in the Violence and Harassment Prevention Plan and any revision to the plan. Section 392, Entitlement to Pay, states that if post-incident treatment occurs during regular work hours, the worker is deemed to be at work during treatment. And editorial changes to improve clarity have been made throughout Part 27. These include updated language and reordered requirements. For all the details of these changes, visit the Part 27 Change Highlights Bulletin on the OHS Resource Portal at ohs-pubstore.labor.alberta.ca/LH009. Next, let's look at changes and clarifications in Part 33, which contains requirements for the safe use of explosives on work sites, including mines. 4 new definitions that apply to Part 33 were added. Blasting cable means a length of wire that conducts electric current through a blasting circuit. Perforating gun means equipment containing an explosive used to make a hole in the casing in a wellbore to promote the flow of fluids and gases into and out of the wellbore. Stemming material means non-combustible material used for stemming. And undetonated explosive means an explosive loaded in a borehole that is not detonated immediately. In addition, 11 other definitions were updated and 4 were repealed. Changes or clarifications were made in sections 468, 468.51, 470.4, 491, 494.1, 503, 504, 517.9, and 517.9995, along with editorial changes and clarifications throughout Part 33. Section 470 and Section 517.91 were also repealed. For details regarding the updates to Part 33, visit the Part 33 Change Highlights Bulletin on the OHS Resource Portal at ohs-pubstore.labor.alberta.ca/LH010. Let's now cover the changes to Part 37, which has safety requirements for upstream oil, gas, and geothermal operations. 8 new definitions were added that relate to Part 37. Derrick means a stationary or portable structure used to support the lifting and lowering mechanism on a drilling rig, service rig, snubbing unit, swabbing unit, or other well servicing or drilling equipment. Drawworks in Part 37 means the machinery on a drilling rig, service rig, snubbing unit, swabbing unit, or other well servicing or drilling equipment that lifts or lowers equipment in and out of the wellbore. Drilling rig means the equipment used to drill a wellbore. Piping system in Part 37 means the pipes and other components, including pumps, used to move liquids, gases, vapors, and any other substances from one location to another. Rotary tong means the equipment used to connect and disconnect drill pipes, drill collars, tubing, casing, and rods on a drilling rig or service rig floor. Service rig means the equipment used to service a wellbore. Rotary table means the part of a drilling rig that applies torque to a drill pipe. And snubbing means the act of moving drill pipes, drill collars, tubing, casing, or rods into or out of a pressurized wellbore. Changes or clarifications were made in sections 752.1, 762, 765, 767, 773, 779, 780, 781, and 782, along with editorial changes throughout Part 37 to improve clarity. For details regarding the updates to Part 37, visit the Part 37 Change Highlights Bulletin on the OHS Resource Portal at ohs-pubstore.labor.alberta.ca/LH011. In addition to the updates in Parts 27, 33, and 37, miscellaneous changes were made in other areas of the OHS Code. Let's look at those now. Several definitions were updated in Part 1 of the Code. The term energy isolating device is defined as a device that prevents the transmission or release of hazardous energy. Note that this term replaces the term control system isolating device, which has been repealed throughout the OHS Code. An industrial power producer in Parts 17 and 40 means an employer authorized in Alberta to generate electrical energy as an independent power producer or solely for its own use in manufacturing or in the handling of material. Secure in Part 15 means ensuring that an energy isolating device cannot be released or activated. And utility worker in Parts 17 and 40 means a worker engaged in the work of an electric utility, industrial power producer, or rural electrification association. 2 requirements were changed. In Part 18, Section 246, CSA-approved respiratory protective equipment was added to the list of respirators employers can use to meet the requirement. And in Part 41, Section 835, the applicable CSA standard is now Z259.12-16 R 2021, connecting components for personal fall arrest systems. A number of other changes and clarifications were made to various sections in the OHS Code, as shown on this screen. For details regarding these miscellaneous changes, visit the Miscellaneous Change Highlights Bulletin on the OHS Resource Portal at ohs-pubstore.labor.alberta.ca/LH012. Thank you for viewing this webinar. If you have any questions about the changes to the OHS Code, email ohsreview@gov.ab.ca. If you have any other questions about occupational health and safety in Alberta, call the OHS Contact Center at 1-866-415-8690. Help us improve our webinars. Please fill out a short survey and give us your feedback. The link to the survey is in the description on the YouTube page below the subscribe button.